the title of our project, our research project was Who Am I and Who Could I Be? Job Hopping Within the AEC Industry. So you can take it over, Thorsten.
Sure. So our project kind of straightforward, basically illustrated the players within the AEC industry. And really what we wanted to do was we wanted to kind of show that job hopping occurs throughout the industry, whether you start on the architecture side or the engineering side. We also call that the design side, and you might have people move over to the owner side or even to the construction side. So our project kind of focuses in on those, and then really what we wanted to learn was, what was the timing or reasons that some people had made these changes in their lives. Making a career switch is a big deal to a lot of people. A lot of people are scared to do it. So we really just kind of wanted to uncover how common it actually is and what are those what those reasons are.
Yeah, and in order to do that, when you start a project or a research, there is always like things that you can do. We can go to the data, we can go to books. We decided to choose the interviews as a method of our data collection for the only reason that we feel like people are more sensitive to storytell and true stories. So we decided to go to the interviews, the steps that we did to have a template for our interview. So we created interview templates with a standard set of questions. The reason why we did that, we wanted just 3 of us to go to different people, but ask the same questions. This way we can compare the responses and get with a data. So we created a template. It was between 8 and 10 questions. We wanted to make sure that we are not like rewording or anything on our questions, just to make sure that we are getting the same answers and comparing the same data as well. And then when it got to the point that we needed to select our interviewees, we wanted to make sure to get at least from each interviewee one who moved from GC, for example, from a GC side to design side, or another from a design side to GC or to owner rep or wherever. But we wanted to get at least one on each arrow. This way we can explain to people and we can show to people that everything can happen. And then at the end of our interviews, our questions, comparing that before the data and the report, we agreed to create a diagram that will show which way the arrows are going more and where the move is happening more from an entity to another. I will let Thorsten get more deeply on what we want on our findings on the interviews.
So before we sort of visually present our findings, I want to just walk through some of the interview questions that we had. Lillia already mentioned we really tried to keep it to like fewer than 10 questions to make sure the interview didn't last too long. And really these questions get at the sort of why people decide to move, when they decide to move, what happened after they undertook a career change, and also just how they went about it. So we ended up successfully interviewing 9 individuals, and in our blog post, we gave them aliases to sort of protect their identities. Because some people did reveal rather personal things, and we didn't want to blast them on the internet. So here we have Architect Andrew sort of as a very good example. We're not going to go through all of the questions, but I just highlighted 3 of them that were particularly relevant. I also want to just note that a lot of our questions are worded, what are 2 to 3 reasons, 2 to 3 aspects. We really tried to get a variety of answers from our interviewees. We weren't really satisfied with these one-word responses, but when we were able to ask the questions in this way, they would tell us really interesting stories that got to the meat of like what actually motivated the change. So for Architect Andrew, what were 2 to 3 main reasons that he decided to adjust his career path? Reasons could be work-life balance, compensation, type of work, mentorship. What was really surprising to me is that a decent amount of people didn't move for pay or for compensation. This person actually moved for increased responsibility. They thought that as an architect, they could only really influence 40 to 50% of a project, and that project started before architects were even involved in terms of like scoping, deciding who future tenants might be, and then continue on after a project, after architects are sort of done and release the building to the client. A client has to live with the building to come. So this was a project architect, project manager, actually, at, the firm that I work at, and they went on to work for the owner in a different capacity to just increase their project impact and influence. So question number 4, we can zoom into that one really quick. I asked him to please list 2 to 3 aspects of his current role and previous role, that, aspects that the roles have in common. And he honestly said, as a project manager in his previous role, he often had to get his team unstuck, to tackle difficult challenges. And he still does that in his current position. But one thing that's really different is, as an architect, typically your client is the owner. And you're sort of dealing with executives. But now that he is the owner, his clients are different. He works in healthcare now, and his clients are the literal patients that have skin in the game. And just talking to them is a very different experience than maybe always being in a boardroom, talking to executives. And then the last point that I really want to drive home, on a 5-point scale, how satisfied was this person with their current role after switching? This person said a 10 out of 5 unprompted. I did not twist his arm. But I also want to say that everyone we interviewed was at least a 4 out of 5, and most of them were a 5 out of 5. And I think even that 4 was still progress. Like, that person might have been a 2 out of 5 on satisfaction before, but then after they made this switch, they're on their journey to being a 5 out of 5. So I just really want to reiterate, usually there's this feeling that if I make a career move or a switch, like, what if it all goes wrong? Did we interview a million people? No, but out of the almost 10 that we interviewed, there were 0 regrets, actually.
So we kind of wanted to visually show this and visually show the career path of each interviewee. So that's kind of what this diagram is showing. While there is a lot of overlap within the AEC industry, we wanted to kind of show them as separate entities, and then some of the general positions within each of those entities. So you'll have supers, subcontractors, project managers, so on and so forth within construction. And ideally what we did was we tried to align commonalities or similar roles or responsibilities with each specific field. So, the way that we kind of viewed it was an architect, a facilities manager, and a superintendent. While they're all very different, while they're all part of a different entity within the AEC industry, they generally oversee a lot of the project and have a very, I would say, equal amount of responsibility and stake within the project. You also have stakeholders, principals, partners, execs. So what we did was we mapped out the interviewees going from one industry to another, and we kind of found some really interesting stuff. One of the main things that we saw was generally each person had 2 to 3 career changes before they were, essentially very satisfied with where they were. And you can see kind of where they end based on the X's within each bubble. Another interesting thing we saw was there are limitations to movements. So, if you look in the architecture and engineering area, you see a lot of people moving from specialty consultants and architecture into construction or into the owner side of the field, and not so much movement going back into those. That could be because that, somebody was satisfied with making that change, or there are limitations. For example, you need a license to be an architect. In order to be a super, you need a builder's license. In order to be an engineer, you need your professional, your PE licensure. So there are limitations that we kind of found, but we found a common trend where architecture and engineering typically kind of where people have seemed to start out, but they don't necessarily end there. And the other thing is, once you leave one industry, it doesn't mean you couldn't go back into another. I'm going to kind of highlight one unique kind of pathway that somebody had made. This person had started out as an architect, and they had actually moved over to the owner side after their career kind of ended with that specific firm. the owner reached out to them, said you did a great job kind of project managing, come be a project manager for us. And then, you know, after a few years there, she felt like there wasn't any growth with that client, and actually came back to the AEC industry. So that was one kind of interview we were really trying to find, and we didn't actually find it to the last second. So it was really kind of nice to almost hit all different transfers and transitions.
But this is actually the slide we wanted to sort of end on, feeling lost and how to get started if you do feel like you are overdue for a change in your career. So I'll take the first bullet. It's really paramount that you find a mentor. And your mentor doesn't necessarily need to be the person sitting right next to you at work. It can actually be someone in an adjacent field, an adjacent industry, or just in an entirely different office. You can find mentors through networking, which we'll talk about next, different professional organizations. But I think it's super important to develop a relationship with someone first, and then be very clear about what you are expecting to get out of that relationship.
After the relationship that you will create with one person, 2 or 3 that will help you on your career, we think that engaging in networking is another big item on the AEC industry. Don't feel scared to know people, and don't think that if you are a project manager, you need just to know people on your level, or just people that will help you to grow on the same entity. So if you are a project manager in GC side, you need to know architects, you need to know the owner, and this is something I personally learned when I moved to the GC side as well. When I was architect, I was more like talking to engineers and in my side, but like I learned that networking has a big impact in first your career, and second in opening your career up as well. The third and not the least is be open to change. I feel like individuals, we always think that we are sometimes less sensitive to opportunities if we are not just growing on the same field, which means like getting from an APM to PM to still on the same side. And we want just to tell people, if you are open to change, this is where sometimes the solution is. If you start just keeping complaining about what is going on, you are unhappy in your job, but you think it's the company that is bad or your team is bad, instead of thinking, oh, maybe I'm not like well in my shoes, as we say, and I would like just to open. As soon as you be open-minded and you are open to that change, maybe the solution will come after. So I think this is what we wanted to just summarize on what we thought, what we found on our blog.
I forgot, we have one more slide, but it's just a super
you
quick
also
one.
have,
I know
you also have 1 minute.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
okay,
totally fine. We just wanted to quickly go through our personal takeaways after this project. I think not letting fear dictate career decisions. It always turned out all right for everyone that we talked to. And then lastly, that your life, your career is also like your most important project, and you should design it the same way that we architects carefully craft our buildings.
Yeah, and for me, it was the fact that we wanted to show to people that you are never stuck. Doors are always open on both sides on the AEC industry. That example that Thorsten was showing, if you go from one side, doesn't mean that, oh, I made a change, now I'm stuck on this, but I don't like it, I would like to go back. You can go back. And I wanted to highlight that one as well.
Yeah, and I honestly did not realize how important networking is. You do really talk to everybody, and you have to meet new people pretty much almost every day. So that really does hold valid and true. And then just kind of understand all aspects of the industry. You might be very good in the field that you do, but you don't necessarily understand what other people have to do. So that's highly, highly important. And that's how you kind of build connections, when you can kind of relate in that sense. So we just wanted to say thank you, and that's our presentation.